Very happy to have on the podcast today Ben Zweig. He's a New York City jazz drummer who's all about mixing rhythms from around the world into jazz. Growing up with the jazz legends, he's gone on to play with some great people like Roy Hargrove. Ben's had the opportunity to travel everywhere from Cameroon to Brazil, digging into a variety of rhythmic styles. He actually brings that to his own band, Big Beat. And with his passion for making music feel real, he's got some awesome things we'll hear, I'm sure. So, Ben, good to see you. Thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Abe. Yeah, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you. So Ben, you've been in this game for a bit, and you've gotten a chance to travel. You've gotten a chance to lead your own band at some of the best clubs in the city. There's a lot of mystery out there about what it's like to be a jazz musician. Do you think there's maybe a misconception about being a jazz musician in this life you wish more people understood?
Hmm. Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of misconceptions about the esteem of it, or if you get some kind of opportunity to play somewhere. Like you mentioned, Roy Hargrove, I think that mentioned that I've shared the stage with him in my bio. But he just used to come to Smalls like almost every night. So we'd be playing it. He would just come in like, I just would share with people. Like I was never hired by Roy, but he was there so much. I felt like I learned a lot from him. And so, I think maybe people they think learning something or trying to be an artist or get into this life is about some kind of like you reach some kind of goal or a milestone or you get hired by somebody or you get on, but it's like I don't know, it's just a collection of all the little things that give you the confidence to do other stuff or to say like, wow, Roy just did his thing, so maybe I can just do my thing with jazz music and with whatever I want. Like he played hip hop music and nobody thought he was less of a jazz musician. And so like that inspires me too. Like, wow, there's a lesson we can all learn. You don't have to be any one thing to still be great at anything.
I've always looked at jazz as the teacher to the other genres based on the complex harmony and rhythm, and of course the improvisation. Do you kind of feel that? Is there any particular style that you think jazz maybe couldn't help you, reach into? Because obviously, I think with rock and
Mhm.
pop, it's pretty easy. What do you think would be difficult to get to with the jazz knowledge? You might have to explore a little bit more.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting thought. It makes me think of just to like kind of put on its head the idea that jazz is the teacher, right? Is like in in West Africa, for example, like rumba music from Cuba originally is super popular and like people love dancing to rumba and it sort of finds its way into all these styles. And it's like this is in a way a West African origin that came to Cuba that developed its own thing and then came back to Africa and people were like familiar with it, but it had something different that they, weren't playing in their traditional music. And I think like jazz is similar in a sense, like you could say like being a jazz musician helps you be a better rock musician or a hip hop musician or something. But then there's people that then take that shit and then they pull that back into the jazz and it's like, okay, well, now jazz is the thing that's benefiting from these other musics are feeding into it. So I think both any genre can kind of come into another one. Maybe it just depends on where your heart's at and what you grow up with. Like, so that's your mother tongue language, so to speak. So everything else is going to be like inflected with the accent of that, probably.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I actually think maybe as artists, we might think, oh, I don't want to pull from my past and just be a jazz person. But, eventually you let go of that. At least that's how I kind of feel. So, and the thing, you're performing all the time. And, we've got a chance to work together. This music is about, there's a lot of risks and we don't, calling tunes on the spot, that sort of thing. There's a lot of surprises.
Hmm.
And I wanted to ask you, has anything when you were performing live, like really caught you off guard and maybe taught you something while it happened that you could look back on?
Huh. Yeah, for me the most obvious example is like I remember points very like to me were heavy moments on the bandstand with great musicians where I didn't know the tune or the form. And I always tell people it's kind of funny thing to say, but like the best thing to teach you a tune is to be on stage not knowing it because it's so embarrassing and so powerful. And like there's your mentor and they're playing like for me it was a tune called Firm Roots, a cedar tune. Has these little things in the form. It's not particularly hard, but I just didn't know it. And then they just like kick it off really fast. And man, I just got my behind kicked. And I will never forget this tune and this experience because it's just seared into my brain how embarrassing it was to be like not knowing this thing. So, I mean, it doesn't happen as much anymore, but every once in a while, somebody just mess with you and call something and start playing it as if you know it. And it's like, all right, I'll do my best. Yeah.
No, it's good to get your shit handed to you. And even so, like it's good to push yourself on your own gigs, even if you're calling the tunes and play something like, incredibly fast or something. And I
Yeah.
like I like how you mentioned that you can bring all these other genres into jazz. And jazz has such deep roots, but it's constantly changing, as you said. Now,
Mhm.
do you think it when you say what does it mean to create something new to you with so much history? Is it just bringing those ideas, or is it more about composition, or is it more about the grooves on the drums? Like, what do you think that would be?
Hmm. Bringing something new. Yeah. I guess now it seems that the way the musical evolution is happening is that because of globalization, all of these like regional genres that were like very special to a small group of people who probably were relatively isolated in the creation of that thing, like all these little isolate points are being connected through the internet. And so now I don't think something new is necessarily forming from like these isolated groups of people like forming a sound. I think it seems to be more of this like, the fusion of different things or, I mean, like what I was saying before, like this rumba music that's kind of like African in origin that develops there and then comes back to Africa and like reforms with like the original traditional musicians that probably, were somehow related to the kind of oral tradition of whatever it is, Yoruba or one of these kind of big cultures that travels there. So I see a lot of people who are fusing things together now who are getting a lot of kind of attention in the media as if they're doing something really new. And it's like, I don't know, it's just almost like these two groups of people who were like distant cousins in, generations apart. And now because the world is coming together, these two groups can be like, hey, like we can communicate musically. It's like, well, yeah, we have the same vein of thing, so I think there's a lot of combinations that are yet to be explored.
No, definitely. That's really interesting for you to hear. And I like how you mentioned the internet too, because I was thinking about learning a song that I heard in a movie one day, and like I couldn't figure out. I'm like, I don't know what the hell this song is called. And then like
Yeah.
you go on the YouTube and like type in the movie and the clip, and then you could bring that into your style, and that goes down another rabbit hole of.
Hmm.
But it's like it's never ending. And you've gotten a chance to perform for some great audiences out there. And we
Yeah.
talked about performing in some of the clubs and stuff or jam sessions. I wanted to ask you if you could perform for any audience, past, present, or even fictional, maybe something like
Yeah.
a movie or something. What comes to mind for you, you think?
Hmm. For me, just like in a musical level, my favorite moments that I've experienced have always been like I guess what's relatable to people in America, at least, is like you think about like the end of the night at like the Thanksgiving dinner, the Christmas party, and like your uncle plays the piano or like accordion, and like grandma and mom sing, and like sister sings, and they've got this little choir that's been going for 35 years. And like those kinds of really intimate family moments where it's like kind of all the guard is off and people are just making music for themselves. I think that to me is just like the number one. And maybe it's a bit of a cop out to say what's the best audience, but when I was in Cameroon, I would just experience at night people, there's no work to be done. People don't have flashlights. So you gather around the fire and you play music until, basically you pass out, time to go to sleep. But it's like just this feeling of there's nowhere to be, there's nowhere to go. There's lots of people just listening, not necessarily participating. Or maybe sometimes people are participating and sometimes they're listening, but everyone's on an equal playing field. And
It's
it's
almost like
like,
you forget where you are and who you are, and you're just living and doing what you do. And the music is almost an extension, I would say.
yeah,
I'm sorry to
definitely.
interject, but that's what came to me.
Totally. It's like the music stops being a performance and starts just being a way of life. And like that to me is the best audience. And there's some audiences that are so grateful and it's such a community already that you show up to perform and you say good morning and they all say good morning, all in one, like these kinds of communities. And you're like,
Yeah.
shoot, like the attention is all in this one focal place. Like this is going to be a good show. And that kind of stuff, yeah, I appreciate a lot.
No, that's great. And in order to perform and to keep going from day to day, there is the inspiration that comes in. So let's talk about that for a second. Is there a piece of music or a record or a video that never fails to inspire you? You know, that's and has been for a number of years.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I I don't know if there is really for me. Like for me, like almost every piece of music that really struck me, it's just gets associated with this like nostalgic time and place that I heard it and the time that I was listening to it. And so I could go back to any one of those things and it would like bring me back to that place and time. Like I think of September in the Rain with Roy Hargrove and Billy Higgins. Like I'm walking home on like the second week of school, from high school from the bus stop and the leaves are falling and it's like literally September in the rain or something. And I'm like, wow, it's amazing.
No, I love that you
You
mentioned
know.
that it brings you back to the place that you were when you first heard it for the first time. It's and there is something that's really special about it. And you're always growing on your instrument. You want to perform better than you did yesterday. And I'm curious, what's something, a new musical idea or drum technique, something you've been experimenting in, that really excites you right now?
Yeah. Man, so I've had this idea for years, but only recently have I really devoted some like dedicated practice time to focusing on it. And I still think it's going to be really big for me, but I'm just at the beginning stages. But basically, so I read there's an Elvin Jones, this full interview of his whole life. And at one point he's talking about how he learned about music and his brother Hank's like, you just need to play duo along with Art Tatum records. That's how you learn to play the drums. Just play duo with Art Tatum. And that like reading that, him saying that really changed the way that I guess and analyzed how Elvin was playing. And I went back, I listened to some of it, and I was like, wow, like the way he plays, he's like, it's like imitates the way Art Tatum plays on the piano, almost like these like really sweeping stretches of like the whole dynamic range of the instrument from highest to lowest in these kind of very rough movements but like the fastest, most fluid movement you can make of all five fingers, right? You watch like transcription of Art Tatum playing. It's like people, the way they move, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you move, you do it again. So I'm thinking about the drums like this now is like, okay, I have four limbs. Presumably, I could play basically two strokes on each limb comfortably. So then my younger brother, he's like a math guy. So I said, write an algorithm that shows me every combination of these four limbs. Like if I'm just gonna go real and it's, right, left, hi-hat, bass, or bass, hi-hat, right, left. Like write me every combination that's simple of all four limbs, the singles and doubles. And it's a extraordinarily finite number of things. If you want to do threes or fours or fives or sixes, like there's a number of things. Like I've just practiced this many things and I can do every combination of that. And so, man, that's now when I go down time to practice, I just pick a line and I say, like, let me see if any of these sound good. And I
No,
just,
that's great. I
yeah.
love I
Mhm.
love yeah, and you mentioned Elvin Jones. I'm not sure if you know what Moises is. It's this app where you can take. Do you know what Moises is?
I've heard of this. Like it isolates the instruments,
Correct.
right? Yeah.
So I took an Elvin track and like it was just 30 minutes of Elvin playing the drums. And just listening to Elvin like play the drums for 30 minutes was like listening to an orchestral piece. At least I felt that way.
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned Elvin. That's why I wanted to mention this too.
Yeah.
Talk about Elvin, what his music means to you and the way he played the drums. He was so innovative at first. I know I've heard him say that, people didn't quite understand. But talk about Elvin for a bit because he's, so prolific.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that question. Elvin means a lot to me. He was the first drummer I heard in the jazz idiom that was like made me want to play the drums. Like the hair is standing on the back of my neck thinking the first time I heard Afro Blue, and he's just like smashing for 6 minutes and that, and you're like, you could do that? Like I had heard modern jazz quartet before that, or like, Meet the Jazz Tet, like a little more buttoned up, still great. But when I heard Elvin, I was like, oh man, this music is no rules.
You
Like,
said you got the chills too. I actually felt something also. We're talking about it. But
yeah, no, that record I feel like hit so many people so hard like that. And Elvin, yeah, what a larger than life character. I can't even imagine what it was like to walk in a room and he was there. I'm sure you just like you'd scan the room and then you'd see him just like sitting there just like I don't know, like it's like the way people describe like these cult figures, where they're just larger than life or something.
no,
Yeah.
I agree with you, and that's why we do, what we do. And let's rewind a little bit too, because you're talking about when you first, heard him that really affected you. Right now, if
Hmm.
you could tell yourself something, your younger self, a
Yeah.
lesson that you know now that you wish you maybe knew a little bit, you knew when you were younger, what do you think you would say?
Yeah. I had to answer this question for an interview recently in this week actually, and I thought it's such a good question, but at the same time, I thought about it for a while, and I thought, man, like if you could go back in time and tell yourself how to work more efficiently, right? And then you didn't have to work through all of the failures and all the things that essentially led to where you are. Like, do you even become who you are if you saved yourself the time?
I don't think
Like,
so.
I don't think the lesson that I learned was the lesson. I think it's how long I had to spend doing it to realize I could still get to something worthwhile. And so if I had just gotten the nugget early on every time, I probably just would have stopped. I don't know, like
Yeah, and
I
also, growing too also means kind of unlearning too, right?
yes. Oh man, that's so deep too. Because like nowadays I find myself unlearning so much. I'm still grateful to know it, but like I'm trying to remember how I approached some technique stuff in high school even before because I feel like every time somebody teaches you something, if you're a really good student, you kind of forget everything you know, you give them the benefit of the doubt, you drop and you say, okay, I'm going to rebuild myself with this thing. And then you do it again, and then you do it again. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with that. There's something to learn from all of them. But at some point, you have to decide, okay. And like now, for me, I just turned 32. Like that feels like the age where I'm like, okay, it's time to like just start making some choices here because we've gone through a lot of different versions of who Ben Zweig is, and it's like it's time to decide, at least for now, I guess. Yeah.
No, and there is the clock that's ticking, and we want to make certain things happen.
Mm,
We all have dreams and things we want to do. If you could play with anybody, because obviously you're and having worked, you're extraordinary player, and I'm sure you could fit in with at the end of the day you could fit in with anybody you wanted to. Like
yeah.
who do you really want to work with right now?
Oh man, that's a really good question. Yeah. I mean, I would love to play with like some like Latin groups, some African groups, some salsa groups. Like, I would love to do a bunch of that stuff. I don't know. I used to think like Ahmad Jamal would, for me, would be like the biggest call. He passed away. Barry Harris, I dreamed about playing with. But the thing about a lot of that is your jazz heroes is like, I mean, it might happen, it might not. You learn all the music regardless. It's like, I don't know. Maybe I've just because of the way the jazz climate is, I've feel like I can't like have these kinds of dreams about like my mega heroes because it feels like unrealistic and not helpful to only dream about that. It's like I'm gonna make music and do my thing. And if my music gets in front of somebody who I dream about playing with and they want to have me on board, it's like I would love to. Yeah.
So be
But
it. Yeah, I mean, it's
yeah.
no, that's great to hear. And you do you find yourself? I mean, you've been doing it for so long. Do you still get nervous when you play, or is it you're just kind of like, this is who I am, I can do it? No, like talk
It
talk about that.
depends. Yeah, no, it really depends. I mean, yeah, I don't get nervous a lot when I have a lot of control of the situation. You know, if I, for example, have been practicing a lot or playing very frequently, and I tour with my buddy Ben Rosenblum a lot. We're just doing a tour that we always do, some trio tour, and we're playing for local audiences, and it's Indianapolis or something. We go to sit down. I'm like, okay, everything's going to be at my fingertips. We're going to do our thing. That's going to be awesome. But like, if I don't really know the music, or like recently I did a festival date and I hadn't played the drums in like 2.5 weeks. I was like traveling around Morocco a lot and just playing a lot of percussion, but just trying to dive into some other stuff. That was kind of scary for me. And I sat down at the drums a lot that morning. It's like, I could play. I was like keeping up rudiments and things, but it's just like, man, am I still gonna be able to do this? Or like, is the muscle memory gonna happen? And I think it's good to put yourself through those situations. If you're never nervous, like maybe you're not learning anymore.
Yeah, I mean, nerves are still very much real, and every people get, no matter how much you play, you're always going to be nervous. And like you said too, um, Roy Hargrove, like you just happen to play with him at Smalls. It's funny you mentioned that, because the first time I went to Smalls to go visit, when I was in Boston, like he just walked
Yeah.
into the room and started playing. I'm like, okay, this is what New York's like. And it reminds me of, that happened to me. I was playing a jam session and Lou Donaldson was just hanging out there because he used to like to hang out a lot.
Yeah.
You've been
Yeah.
in those situations before,
Yeah.
unquestionably. Are you able to like kind of block it out and just what happens in those situations for you?
Yeah. Honestly, man, I miss those situations so much in retrospect because that to me that is what New York was. And like the thought that I was gonna play the late night at Smoke and like, Al Foster was just gonna hang and Buster, they're just hanging at the back table the rest of the night. Like what? Like I'm gonna play these tunes for them, and that's like that really makes you like put it into overdrive. You really want to play your best. And like I've done a few tours with some like real master musicians, and it's like everyone in the band's like, we played really well this tour, right? It's like it's just because somebody's in the room who like you feel like it matters to them where the history of their music's going. And man, like Smalls, when I first moved here and I went there, and it's like Roy is hanging, Ugana's hanging, whoever played the Vanguard is hanging, Joel From's shouting lyrics that you forgot, to the front of the room. And it's like, there's just all these amazing characters hanging there. It's so beautiful. And it's something I don't know if it exists in the same form in the jazz scene in New York as much these days. I maybe, I'm not there hanging as much as I used to either, but it's like, it feels a little like certain generations have kind of dropped the ball and like being out and giving back to the young people and like
Yeah.
somebody needs to do it because somebody needs to do it.
Yeah, one time Russell Malone was at my gig. He was like the only one there, and I was like, "This." He walked in and said, "I'm like, this sucks." I was just like, you know, really? Yeah.
Russell said that?
No, no, I
Oh,
know. I
oh,
thought to myself, I'm like, this sucks,
oh,
like,
because he's gonna have to like he's gonna be like all ears listening to
yeah,
you
I'm
and
just
it's
like
just
this.
him.
I'm like, all right, whatever, and you have to kind of rise above it, and the ego comes into place. And
Yes.
when I like to think about, um, we think about our egos and we think about success, and um, they kind of can run hand in hand sometimes, even though, success is a very personal thing. And some people would say I like, played with this person and played with this person or did this tour. But the way you're talking about growing and stuff, it almost sounds like success to you is like you just want to keep evolving, like especially when we talk about the mathematical approach to the drums and just, keep on. Is that success for you to just keep on doing it and growing in simple in those simplest terms? Because talk about that for a sec.
Yeah. Yeah, on a day to day, that's got to be success because I mean, short of, Ahmad Jamal having called me and said, Mr. Zweig, would you like to join my next tour with me? Like, I'm never gonna have that one moment. So then, and I have goals, like my band did a record. I want to find a label to release the record. I would like to get, to create a deeper scene with my percussion band. This is Big Beat, just to like, because I really believe that that could be like a facet of my world. But somebody explained it the best way is like everyone has a garden. You have different areas that you need to tend to. And success is when your garden is doing well, right? Like if one part of your garden looks dead as fuck and the rest is like, yeah, I don't know, you just like it's not a successful garden. Like your cucumbers are messed up. I don't know. So you need to tend to everything and like, little things will happen. You'll pick certain fruit at certain times and that's as metaphorical as I can get, but
No, no, this is
yeah.
great, and I'm glad we got a chance to talk and reconnect after whatever it was 7 years or something when we last played together. But
Yeah.
I
Thanks so
hope we get
much,
a
man.
yeah, I hope we get a chance to do it again and and play and with the other Ben, or something.
Yeah, it's been years since I saw him too. Man, I would love to. I'd love
Uh,
to. I just saw he was on the road with James Austin. That looks great.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
he's cool. So yeah, Ben, where can people find you on social media and your website?
Yeah. Benzweigdrums.com or BENZDRMS. That's the Instagram handle. And my band is big.beat, BEET, like the vegetable.
Like the beats
And
from Doug on Nickelodeon.
yeah, or I think of one big bleeding giant heart that's in all of us.
Yes, sir. Well,
Yeah, man. Well, thanks so much, Abe. I really appreciate it.
appreciate you being here.